Dude, I got it. Dude. So every now and then we get it right. So everything got pinned. We're good to go, dude.
Just 4 minutes late.
Yeah, just 4 minutes late, which actually it's a that's actually a
Not
positive.
fast.
That's actually a positive, right? We're actually kind of semi on time.
Yeah, somewhat.
Yeah. Hey guys, welcome back to another. Actually, we're a week early, right? Because normally you fatigue next week, right? So
Yep.
um, our bi-weekly show turned into a weekly in this instance because um, man, something happened today, huh?
Yeah, it did, but honestly, I don't know if it was because the coach Campbell step down felt bigger. This just wasn't like awe shocking to me, and I don't know why. Maybe it's because we'd been tipped off a little while back that Coach Herring was kind of thinking about it, right? So it wasn't one of those like, oh, whoa moments, but it wasn't like blew my doors off shocking. But I think the Coastal Bend, for the people that aren't as tapped in, it was probably one of those, oh, dang, like that's that's some big news. And obviously, right, 17-year run in Refugio, one of the probably more incredible runs we've seen across the state. Uh, with a lot of big names up there. So yeah, pretty big news for the Coastal Bend for sure.
Yeah, man, and kind of
The
like you
state,
said,
honestly, it kind of it's another one of the big blue blood programs, right? In high school football, and they lost the man at the helm. He's stepping away from the sidelines a little bit. So I think teams in Region 3 are going to be kind of zoning in on this one, right? You know,
possibly, right? Possibly. Well, they broke the curse this year, right? Region Three finally got past Region Four in what seems like a decade, right? At least, right? Roughly, maybe.
it's been a minute.
It's been a while. Maybe not a decade, but it's been a while. So we've got some guys jumping in with us today to kind of talk a little bit wax poetic again, just like you said about another blue blood program that that opened. Well, not really opened, kind of, sort of. I mean, I guess we'll get a little more in depth on it when we get a lot of the guests in. A lot. We've got two. So Len Hayward is here from the Caller Times, and he talked to Coach Herring today. And then we've got Mike Forman from the Victoria Advocate, Advo Sports, that's going to check in with us a little bit. He's at a track meet, so we're going to see how we can get that worked in. But yeah, we're gonna bring the relative experts in and talk a little bit about his career and what this opening. Not really. I keep calling it an opening. Let's just get Len in and we'll go with it from there. Len, how you doing, buddy?
Good evening. How are you?
Not bad, man. We appreciate you coming on, especially we put this all together today, obviously, right? We're in scramble mode. I sent a shotgun blast of text out today. Hey, man, can y'all come on? Can y'all come on? Can y'all come on? And everybody had something going on. Like, so right now, the state basketball tournament's getting ready to gear up for boys this weekend, right? So there's a lot of stuff going on in San Antonio. DCTF, they have a basketball stuff that they cover as well. So Matt couldn't come on. Tep had some sun issues today, so he couldn't come on. Again, I like to get the state's kind of pulse on jobs like this, man. It's good insight. But Len's kind of been around Coach Herring a while, right? Because if you guys remember, Len was out in West Texas for a while. So was Quentin. I think Quentin missed his time out there in West Texas, but you were out there for a little bit, right, Len?
Yeah, I guess the best way to put it is ran across Coach Herring a couple times later in his stint at Sonora because they were in the same district with a couple of teams that we covered in Midland, and then also I believe one year they played Midland Greenwood in non-district before he ended up going to Refugio in '07. So I didn't have much contact with him other than a questionnaire and stuff like that. It's been here though that I've had a little more contact with him since I got here in 2015.
So I think his record overall is like 293 and some
Yes.
change. I think is what you put up today, right? That was in your story today.
Yeah,
293 and some change.
he's won 293 games during the course of his career. I think he's won. I have to go back and look at the release. I think it's 242 or 243 at Refugio. His winning percentage, I believe, is over 80%, maybe higher than that during his time at Refugio. And one of the things that I found was He's never won less than 11 games in 17 years at Refugio.
Yeah, that's what Step had put up, and I saw you had it as well. Pretty impressive, right? So 7 title game appearances in 17 years, 3 wins out of those 7.
Yeah.
I mean, that's man. I don't know. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot to take in. And I think Quentin tweeted this earlier. It's like in the past 6 months, we've had 3 high profile jobs in the Coastal Bend come open, right? With Steinbrook first, right over at Flower Bluff, and I think Elwood has still got the interim tag. I don't think that's been
yeah, they haven't. I think that could be a school board thing. It could be it could be anything of just sometimes it takes a while to get some of this stuff in place in terms of contracts and
I was tipped off by someone at the Islanders game the other day that they're getting ready to announce pretty soon.
Yeah, because
I think I heard around spring break, after spring break.
Yeah, this is typically the time of year in school districts when contract renewals come up for teachers.
Yes.
Typically, administrators are approved in December. I think it's usually December or January. They get the administrators approved, and then March is typically when teachers' contracts are approved for the next year. So that's pretty much everybody, teacher, coach, everybody. So I'm sure, when you're doing something like that, what they're doing in Flower Bluff, you got to make sure all your ducks are in a row before you do that. And I think that was a little bit of with Refugio, because like you guys, we had heard the rumblings, about him possibly stepping down, and I thought, it's going to come at some point. I sincerely thought he might do another year, but I did know that he looked tired this year.
Yeah.
When I saw him at practices and I saw him at games, he looked tired. And
he looked like he lost a lot of weight.
Yeah, and I think it's just, he's one of those guys that is so into the game and so into the season, because when you see him in the fall, he's a completely different. He's almost completely different when you see him at a track meet in the spring or a baseball game. He still has a little bit of that in him when you see him, that intensity, but it's much different. And I think with this is I think he kind of sat back and took stock of some things and was like, I can step back and see. And one of the things that I thought was interesting when I asked him, and I said, did you think about retiring? Because he's 54. I figure he's vested. I mean, he's probably been in for more than 30 years. And he said, I never thought about that. He said, I think I still have a lot to give, but it was just the stress and pressure of coaching, I think, that really was taking a toll on him.
Kind of a victim of your own success.
I got a couple. There's a couple things I would like to talk about on that, right? Because there's a lot you just opened up right there, Lynn. First of all, I will agree. I ran into him at a baseball game, Refugio, when they had Jared Kelly. It was when they went three games with golly, is the eventual, I think, state winner or state runner up, and this was like 2019, because I think Jared was a junior at the time or whatever it was, but a completely different person than when we got almost escorted out of a practice one time.
that was our first road show.
Yes, but and Jacob's told me this before, and I've had buddies that have coached underneath Coach Herring, and everyone will tell you that we've come across that, like, you better be ready to put in some serious hours in that field house.
Yeah.
And not to mention, these are dudes that are having to teach as well, right? So they, that program's ran. They're putting a lot of hours in. They don't have as much amenities as some schools. They're running trainer duty, water boy duty.
Yeah.
So it's like I could definitely see where he would be, probably tired out from his own doing, right?
Yeah.
Like Jeff said. But man, it just seems like if I get him being the AD and continuing that on, but at the same time, I texted Jake this earlier, you would think a school like Refugio is to get that next guy, if they want a replacement, hopefully somewhere in this guy's caliber, or even live up to half of what he'll put out there, a guy that's looking to be an AD and head coach, right? So does that start cutting into your your talent pool of coaches that you can bring in, because 2A job, 3A job, that's somewhere where a guy's going to want to have AD, HFC role to be able to, hey, I can do this. I'm going to make another jump.
Right, and I think that's probably part of the reason Coach Cox is was named to take the job, because he can be a football coach. He may have some other administrator duties, but with Coach Herring still around as the athletic director, that gives him a little bit of a buffer as well, and he can also and you can also see that I think that it's just taking the stress off of Coach Herring, that Drew is there knowing the program is in good hands, because those two have been together for 25 years. So I don't think a whole lot's going to change in terms of what Refugio does. There might be a little bit of, I don't know that Drew's going to do a whole lot of different wrinkles than what they would have done under Coach Herring. But I think the big thing is that that's why this move is made, because this may be a situation like Coach Campbell, where Coach Cox coaches for another 3, 4, maybe 5 years, retires, and then that's when maybe Refugio's got somebody on their staff that they feel like can take it, or they open it up. And one of the things I've found out about Refugio, and Mike may be able to speak on this better than I can, is that their superintendent, Melissa Gonzalez, has been there for a while too. She's been there for probably as long or longer than Coach Herring has. And, that's a situation where you have people that have been in that district. They live in that city, and they know that town, and that they're invested in it, I guess is the right word.
Well, I think her husband's the sheriff.
They're invested in it.
Right?
And,
So,
and I think
they're really in.
Yeah, and I think that's a key thing, because I'll tell you this much: when that job comes open, and if it's advertised, that's a job people want. It's hard, it's tough. It's a job it's a hard job. It's probably one of the hardest jobs in the state of Texas in all sports. There's a few jobs in Texas high school sports that are very hard and demanding. And Refugio football is one of those. And there's such high expectations when you take that job. And the program has statewide, and to a certain extent, regional, nation. People know Refugio football across the country, and some of that had to do with Harvey, and then also the Outside the Lines feature they did on it. But people knew about Refugio before that.
Yeah.
And so it's a tough job, but it's going to gain some interest.
And that's a job too, where I talk to old heads from Refugio, because I have ties there, and I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but they bounced a coach out very fast. It felt like he was running the program into the ground right before the coach before Herring got there, and they're not gonna sit around and wait. And that's another thing too. If some chance, and I don't think it would happen, if Cox were to struggle within 2 years, I guarantee you the town would be, hey, what's going on here?
Well, what I mean? So here's the flip side of that, right? So Coach Cox is pretty old. He's pretty old school, right? And I don't think he's a very political type of person with those jobs. So, on the flip side of that, he's probably retirement eligible. And he gets tired of it, gets some backlash, he may step, right? So here's the question, right? So they obviously had a succession plan in place,
yes,
right, with this, but in 2 to 3 years, I mean, how do you plan for that next succession plan, right? I mean, some of these hot names may not be hot names in 3 years, or they may be content where they're at. Do we see a potential where Cal Allen's at right now? Because they had a succession plan 2 years ago, right? So where do you draw that line and say this is a great plan forward?
I'll say this. One thing that's different about Refugio, and you two guys who've grown up here, and Quentin and I have learned this, and and Ray Castillo knows this too, because he grew up in Corpus, but it seems like all roads lead to Refugio. It's like, and because there are, think about 2 head coaches that are in the area now that have ties to that program.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Coach Castellano down at Alice and Coach Huerta over at Odom.
Hey.
I'm not-
I
dude, I'm not-
already talked to Quentin. You keep his name out of your mouth. All right. Don't make me pull a Will Smith. All right.
I'll be honest
I'll
with you.
jump right through this screen.
But
Okay.
but you understand what I'm saying.
I get it. But
Is that
however,
program-
comma, there's also another who's not a head coach, athletic director, but there's another guy who's an offensive coordinator at a 4A to soon 5A school who's got direct ties to the next head
Right.
coach,
Right.
Cam Cox.
Yeah,
Right?
it's but you understand what I'm saying is that Refugio is one of those programs that there are connections to it around this area and in some parts of the state. It's like Permian was in the glory days. I mean, if you think about all the guys at one point in time that it coached for Gary Gaines, either while he was at Permian or at other places. Gary Gaines had a tree that went all kinds of branches for a while into the 2000s. So I think that's one of those things that and I think a lot of that ties goes back probably to Coach Harris and Bobby Kelly. But there's a lot of coaches that have ties to that program in one way or another. And I personally think Coach Cox, he's probably going to be there for the next 3, 4, 5, probably 4 to 5 years, I'm thinking. And then once that gets to the point to where probably when Coach Herring decides to retire, and then they may have, maybe they got another succession plan in place. I think that, but I would give, Melissa Gonzalez the credit to know that she's probably thought about that before, this happened, and, knowing, what that program means to the community, what it means for the kids, and what it means for South Texas, because that's the flag bearer for South Texas in terms of state level success. Let's make no mistake about that.
I think, honestly, and if this was me, right, and I was in this position, and they've probably known for a minute this was coming. That's why you had the real quick transition to Coach Cox. I think where they're at as a program, where Coach Cox is at, where Coach Herring being the AD is at, I would have to think there's probably some truthful conversations that have went on or going on with what Coach Cox's plan is and how long he intends to stay. And my thing is I would assume that at some point in time, as long as Coach Castellano continues to have the success, which I absolutely think he will, I think that would be within a year or so of, hey, that is your job. When you want to come home after a couple years and the success is still there at Alice, I would think that would be the number one phone call, and it would be, hey, this is your job if you want it.
Right.
He takes that, or he decides to walk away from Alice, which I think is kind of hard because I think he's building something really good over there. They're getting some nice facilities. They're getting a new stadium. That's hard to walk away with, but sometimes home is where you're from, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he just now sold his house in Refugio, I believe, this year. He's lived in Refugio the entire time he's coached down here.
Yeah.
So to piggyback on that, Justin, is where does he have a better chance of winning a state title?
And that's where I'm going is, the chance to, hey, I've done this at Alice. I've left Alice in a good spot. And this is all speculation, right? This is us BSing. But I've left Alice in a good spot. They want me to come back home. And you can finish off your career at your hometown with a chance to win a couple state titles probably. I mean, it's there. The trip to state at Refugio is there if you put the work in. And I think he's very capable of doing that at Refugio. I think Coach Herring was a match made in heaven for what that town and program needs. You said how hard it is to run that program with just the amount of expectation, given what you're given facility-wise and having to do dual jobs. And this dude's probably putting in 26 hours, if we're being honest, right? Coach Herring was.
Oh, yeah.
I think a guy like Coach Castellano would be, to me, if the success continues, hey, like this is your job in a couple years. And depending on what Coach Cox wants to do, who knows? He might want to do 5+ years there. I don't know. He is getting up there, and
I mean, he may want to coach for 2 or 3 years and Coach Herring shows him the reins of being an AD, and he may take over that AD job at some point. Being head football coach and AD for a while. I mean, we really don't know. Let's get through year one of the Drew Cox era, kind of before we really kind of speculate. But he's going to have tremendous pressure on him to succeed. Simply because it's Refugio. It's black and orange. I mean, and,
I think the best thing is he understands that because he's been there so long with Coach Herring, right? So he knows what to expect. And I think you're right. The buffer of Herring staying AD is huge because he can kind of bridge that connection with maybe the town or the political aspect of it, where Coach Cox might just want to be, hey, I just want to coach football. Right?
Correct. Yes.
And
yeah.
I don't need to go stand in front of a podium and speak, and just write it that way. And it is interesting because I think Coach Cox is probably one of those guys that he's pretty deserving of getting his chance. He's just like Coach Campbell. He was with a super successful head coach, and he stuck in there because he probably liked to win and like the grind.
Yeah,
and it is nice to see a guy like him them not say, hey, well, we're gonna go get someone else because we don't think you're cutting it. I do like that aspect of it, that he's getting his chance.
And one of the things I've noticed in living down here for the last 9 years, going on to a decade, is that it seems like coaches around here, whether assistants or head coaches, they seem to stick around this part of the state. In West Texas, there was a lot of transition, where you would have guys come from El Paso and maybe a guy from the Panhandle go to work in Midland or Odessa, and then they're gone to the Metroplex, or there's a lot of in and out with coaches. There's some who stuck around, but around here, it seems like coaches tend to stick around a while. Whether if you think about some of the guys who coach, the perfect example is Justin Evans. I'm sure Justin at some point in his career as a coach probably had a chance to go maybe to San Antonio or to Houston or somewhere else and coach, but here he is in his hometown coaching at Miller. Mike Cantu, over at Moody. He's a lifer here in Corpus, born and raised here. And so it's one of the things I've noticed about this area is that, coaches stick around here. Even if they lose their jobs, they end up somewhere else, coaching somewhere else in South Texas. So I think that's one of the things. I don't know whether it's the weather. I don't know whether it's the water. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's a little bit different than what I experienced in my time in West Texas. Even to a certain extent, working in DFW for the 8 years I worked there, with the Star Telegram, was that there was a lot of movement within DFW, but some of those guys would go to different parts of the state as well. But
I think it's because around here we may be a little more forgiving than other areas of the state.
That could be part of it too. I think that's part of it too as well. And the other thing is too is that I think there's a lot of schools around here who put an emphasis on football, but it's not the be all end all for a lot of schools if you think about it. Because there are a number of schools in this part of the state that are more known for other sports, namely baseball, than football. Sinton, for example. Sinton is known for both, but the skins on the wall at Sinton are those state baseball championships.
Cal Allen as well.
And you're right about Cal Allen as well. And
Refugio is one of the only schools around here that I feel like when you think about, and I'm not discrediting any other sports they have, but like everything else outside of their track program the last couple years and Jared Kelly's run, football completely overshadows it's the entire town. Like it's
right.
You talk about Refugio, you're not talking about the truck stops or like the police other than the police bombarding you on the way in and out. You're talking about Refugio football and their runs.
Right.
And occasionally, hey, they had a great track program. They won state. They've had a couple state qualifiers, a couple state winners. I think the girls have won state in the last couple of years. But even that in itself, it's like, and the people there, like the people that have kids on the track team, don't take offense to it because most of those kids are on the football team or they're participating with the cheerleaders. And it's like that's the entire town. And then you're right, like other towns around here, it's a little split. I think Sinton actually in the last couple of years has kind of pushed a little more ahead with baseball as what they want their town to be. Kind of, maybe we talk about Sinton, we talk about Sinton
Yeah.
baseball, football, right? There's
Yeah.
been a power struggle. Cal Allen's had that power struggle, right?
Yeah.
Rob's
And I agree with Jacob that there's probably a lot more forgiveness around here for a number of schools and programs than there are in other parts of the state. I think that's there. You'll see a coach here get maybe a fifth or sixth year when in other parts of the state, if they don't compete, if they're not showing it by year 4, they're out the door. The school board's pushing them out the door.
Yep.
And I think that's something. I think that's something good to be said for the school districts here. Is that they, sometimes sometimes you do have to cut ties with someone if they've been there for a while and they're just not showing any success. But if they're on the verge and you have some school board members who are forgiving enough to say, okay, we understand that there may be a lack of this, a lack of that, and we're willing to ride it out for another year, maybe 2, before we make a change.
Yep.
And I think that says that's something. There's something to be said for that, because I've witnessed the pressure cooker that is the Little Southwest Conference, out there in West Texas, and even as they fell behind DFW in terms of state level success to the Carrolls and the South Lake Carrolls and the Euless Trinities and stuff, the pressure cooker was still there. There was still pressure to win, and there isn't that type of forgiveness out there that there is in this part of the state. With that, because people, there's a lot. It's tough. It's hard to coach out there. It's tough to coach out there. They pay you a lot of money to win football games out there, and they expect you to win football games. And it's not quite what it was, 30, 40 years ago, but it's still pretty pressure packed out there to coach.
And on top of that, try telling those people that they can't compete with the DFW or the Houston people now, but they're going to look at you and be like, you're batshit crazy, right? I think another thing too about some of the jobs down here is I think there's an addictive grind to take this place that, outside of Refugio's success that we haven't seen before, right? And the capability is there because now I will give the Valley credit. The Valley in the last couple of years with the way they've realigned things has made, these runs a little harder, a lot harder on some of us, right, to get as far along the playoffs that, I think the potential is there. But, I think that coaches want to win football games. They want to prove themselves. And you got a good program that you built around here. You want to see how far you can take it. And, Coach Evans is a good example. He's taken Miller to, unfathomable. Most people don't even remember. I can't even give you the last time I witnessed Miller football be atrocious. It's been a minute.
Right.
And that for a long time was something that was just expected there. Even when they every now and then would pop up a decent year.
And the Valley is an interesting case study for me in the fact that area is growing so fast.
Yep.
And the more population you get, the more kids you have, the more kids you have that are going to add to those schools to be where you might not have just one Brownsville Veterans Memorial, but maybe 2 or 3.
Yep.
That can go 3 or 4 rounds and either be competitive with a school from the San Antonio, especially at the 5A level. It's a different animal at the 6A level. Unless you've got 1 or 2 D1 linemen on both sides of the football at the 6A level, you're not going very far. But at the 5A level, you can compete at that level with those schools. And, from San Antonio, it's a little harder when you get north to Houston and DFW and, in schools like that. But the Valley is an interesting case study about how they've changed and how those schools' enrollments really haven't changed as the realignment number for 6A keeps going up. And the number of charters being built in the Valley is sort of spreading kids out all over. But those schools that were once 6As are now 5As, and they still got a little bit of 6A talent mixed in there.
Yeah.
with that, and I think that's something that's I think that's the Valley is coming, and I think there's going to be some surprise. I think it's going to continue to rise over the next 4 to 6 to 8 years as the population down there continues to grow.
That and the fact that their people are committed
Yes.
to getting success. Like they don't stop at anything when it comes to getting facilities, being behind programs, and finding ways to how do we evolve, right? How do we get better? How do we get to that? And the crazy thing that's cool with them is they travel well.
Yeah.
For even if it's not their team, it's at a certain point. Jacob said a long time ago, it's basically whatever Valley team's left standing is representing the rest of the Valley, and they're gonna travel with them, right?
Yep.
And I think that's kind of cool in its own right. And yeah, I think a lot of people they want to discredit the Valley teams, and that's one of the things that
I think they get just I think a lot of that comes from going up against Austin Westlake and Converse Judson and all those years when facing the behemoths of Region 4. Whether it's San Antonio Brennan or Holmes or MacArthur or whoever, whatever of the 10 million school districts that are in San Antonio, going up against, they always get beat. But I think now, since some of those schools are now at the 5A level, they don't have to see them till later in the year. I think that's kind of helped to bring it up. And the big thing is that I've noticed about them is the fact that is that they do travel well and they support. They come out to games, and I think that's something that there's something to be said for that in that kind of support and people wanting to support them, because they're almost like El Paso in the fact that they're everybody thinks they're kind of remote and out there and they're in their own little world. But they're still part of the state of Texas. They're still in districts, and they still have the same shot to go into the playoffs like everybody else does. So I think they're an interesting, and they have those in those two corners of the state between El Paso and the Valley has really surpassed El Paso in a handful of ways, but they're experiencing some success, and I think they're going to keep continuing to experience success as time goes on.
So we're kind of drifting.
Yeah. Right.
We're drifting big time, but so you kind of hit on this earlier, Lynn. In the next 3 to 4 years, whatever happens, is Refugio a good job?
Yes. It's a good job in the respect that the community is involved, but it's a tough job. It's tough, and it's a job that takes a certain kind of person. And that's why Jason Herring was a perfect fit, because
and the flip side of that is you're not winning with all the bells and whistles there.
No,
because the facilities are not great.
Right.
Their stadium was condemned for a season a few years ago. Remember, they had to play all their games on the road.
Correct.
They have an indoor facility. It's not the best. The weight room's pretty Spartan. As Justin and I found out that first time we went out there and almost got run off.
Right.
So I mean, it doesn't have the bells and whistles, right? That attract people today. But what they do have, and we hadn't really hit on it yet, is they have kids there that want to win.
Yes.
They have kids there that are committed.
Yeah.
Right. And it may be a hard job, but I think that right there is reason to put your name in the hat if it does come open, right? Because you do have those kids, you have the community support, which can go backwards, right? It goes both ways, right? You lose a couple of games, man. Justin, remember the year that the flex cat, man, that year
Kelly's freshman year,
they lost to Goliad that year, and
a good Goliad team too.
It was a very good Goliad team. Rocky Morrison got hurt in that season, they probably would have gone a lot further.
Yeah.
But man, they turned fast.
Yeah,
they turned fast that year.
Yeah, it is a tough job, but there are kids that are committed. There's a community that's committed. Also, there are some talented football players in that city and in that county, and And I think that helps as well. Because Refugio, when it comes to their depth, especially their speed, they're typically at that level of Class 2A. They're usually among one of the faster teams in the state, regardless of where you're at.
Yes.
And I don't know, what's in the water in Refugio. I have no idea, but they're usually going to have some kids that can run. And, they're going to have a couple linemen that are going to, defensive linemen or two that you're going to go, wow, okay, that's not a 2A lineman, So I think they seem to have a pretty good, a pretty good balance of talent and a pretty good balance of the communities involved, and they like to win. And that the community involved part can be good and bad, but I think you can learn a lot from how Coach Herring handled that throughout the course of the year, and in dealing with all that those kids have to deal with, that go to that school, because there's a socioeconomic situation too.
Yep.
With that school district as well. It's hard to know what some of those kids are going through that walk through the door, and that's at any school.
Yeah.
And especially in a rural county like Refugio, rural town like Refugio. I grew up in a similar community in Hillsboro, where you have some of those socioeconomic situations that you don't know whether the person's, you don't know whether the friend sitting next to you in your history class has had breakfast that morning or not, and you don't know what kind of situation, that they're walking into, when they go home at night. And that's one of the things that Coach Herring was so good at, was that relating to those kids and also making sure that they had what they needed. And I learned a lot about him during Hurricane Harvey. He was focusing on the food and the water, but you know what he also focused on? Beds. He was making sure kids had beds and somewhere to sleep, where you would walk into the indoor facility in the fall of 2017, and there would be beds lined up in the indoor facility for kids or whoever needed them to come get.
And that's the side of coach that a lot of folks don't see.
No, I know.
Right, because you mentioned it earlier, the outside the lines thing that ESPN did so many years ago. We talk about it all the time. That made him the most hated coach in America.
Yeah.
But you look at it now, he's ahead of his time.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Because now you're seeing these 70, 80-point ball games every week.
Yeah.
You don't have anybody blinking an eye at that now.
Yeah, and I've known that, in talking to Mike Forman, he really kind of bites nails on realignment, because I think he would rather be in a district with Shiner and be in a tougher district than be in a district and in an easier district, because and then you can fill your non-district schedule all you want, but then when you're playing 4 or 5 games where you're housing people and scoring 50 points in the first half, it's hard to get your kids ready for what you're going to face in the postseason. And I think he almost would rather be in a district with a Shiner and a Ganado and people like that, because it prepares you for that. It prepares you for those games. And so, he probably was ahead of his time. And I think with that kind of stuff, but that's just who they were. That's what they did. I don't know that he could have done anything else. I'm sure, because I've known him in games where he was running freshmen out there, in the third quarter, and they were still. What do you
want to score?
Yeah.
You're not going to tell a kid not to score,
right? Exactly.
You can, but
and that goes back to those kids. That's the type of kids they have over there. They legitimately dream. That's like one of the biggest highs you can probably get if you're from that town, is getting to put black and orange on Friday night, and go out there and play with a Bobcat on your helmet. You know what I mean? That's the biggest high you can get.
Exactly. So, I'm glad. I am kind of glad they're doing it this way, because it's someone that the community knows. It's always tough to follow the legend, but the legend is there with you.
And it seems like everybody's on board. I haven't seen any bad. I haven't seen any, when these things like this happen. Oh, we should have did this. We should have did this. No, man, everybody's happy for Drew. and they seem it's the right path. So that's a great first step.
Yes,
for sure.
Yeah, and it's going to be similar. I think it's going to be similar in Flower Bluff when that announcement comes down, whenever it may be. And the funny thing is, it's probably it's Coach Steinbrook doing it, so they'll tell him what kind of delays he's doing just to to make sure everything's good, so he can make that announcement. But and I think that's I think it'll be good, and I think that it helps that he's around. That Coach Herring will be around, but also I think he's going to give Drew some leeway to coach, just to keep him, just so he's not as involved as he needs to be. And there's nothing wrong with Drew asking him, say, hey, what would you do in this situation? There's nothing wrong with that, but I think Coach will give him the leeway to do what he needs to do, and so he can focus on some other things, with the program and stuff, and with the athletic program and everything else.
I don't think Mike's going to jump on. I think he's caught up. He's at a track meet right now in Cuero right now. And earlier, before we went on, he said the 200 is about to start, and Ernest is running. So he's probably not going to be able to get on in time. I don't want to keep prolonging. Everybody's got stuff to do. Right? So we'll figure something out as it goes on. He'll chime in. Maybe we'll get him on one-on-one or something. But man, that's really all I got. Justin, you got anything before we go?
No, man. I think you hit it on the head here, and let's not discredit Lynn statewide. Remember, keep in mind he's headed in the state. Okay, newspaper.
Yeah. So before we go, it would not be complete, if we didn't give one of these, it would not be complete.
No.
What is too high? Is it 40? Is it 60? Is it 70? Is it 80? Is it 90? What is the rule?
Ahead of his time, man. He was ahead of his time.
I didn't realize how young he was in that video.
Yeah. If I should have put up a side by side, but he is very young.
Yeah.
There. And that was what, like 2010?
I think it was around there, 09,
2011, somewhere around there, right? That's when they were running the air raid, right? That was around their first title game, wasn't it? Somewhere around there.
Yeah.
But so
he's one of a kind, and it's like I tweeted. I've covered this sport for 30 years, and I have met few legends and covered few legends in my time, and he's one of them.
So let me ask you this, Lynn. In those 30 years, have you seen something like this where you've had these three big jobs open up within 6 months of each other? Or I keep saying open up, but not this many at one time in this size market. I mean, in DFW, there would be years where there would be jobs, multiple jobs open up, but not like this. Not three marquee programs, all of them having their coaches either step aside and hand off to somebody else or look for a new one. I will say that Cal Allen's situation reminds me a lot of when Midland Lee lost, when John Parchman resigned from Midland Lee, and they were kind of trying to figure out a direction to go with it. I think it's a very similar situation, where there's a lot of people. It's going to be a hard decision to kind of figure out which way you want to go. You still want to keep the traditions alive, but you also want to try to go in a different enough direction to get the program moving forward. I think that's a no-win situation right now, for that board and that superintendent, because either way they go, whether they hire somebody who's been with the program, familiar with the program, wants to keep their ways, you're going to have a section of folks happy with that. Right. And you're going to have the other folks saying it's time to change things up.
Right. And I will say this, in looking to see who their search firm has helping them. I'll
tell you about the conspiracy theory when we get off the air.
Right. But you saw the name Bob Ledbetter, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you understand who Bob Ledbetter is, right?
Go on.
Okay. Bob Ledbetter hired 2 state championship winning coaches during the course of his career. One was an assistant in Steve Lineweaver, who went on to win a state title at Commerce, then went on to win titles at Euless Trinity and turned Euless Trinity into the state power that they are now. The other one was he hired a little known mediocre coach from Carrollton Newman Smith named Todd Dodge. When Todd Dodge was hired at Carroll High School, people really didn't know what to think of him. There was thoughts that he was a good offensive mind, but they really didn't know whether he would have any kind of success. And I remember when Coach Dodge got hired, Coach Ledbetter was very confident, like, I like this guy. He's got something, and we really like him. Next thing you know, look at what Carroll's done. So if I'm a Cal Allen fan and I see that name, and do a little research, he kind of knows what he's doing in terms of finding the right fits for programs. And, so I think it's going to be there are going to be people that are going to be upset. It happens, especially in a situation where you've had assistants that are there for a while and have been working with a group of kids for a while. That's going to happen, but sometimes you've got to make the decision that you feel like is in the best interest for the program for the next decade, 2 decades, as well, to do that. And I think that's one of the things that Quentin and I were talking about is, that school district hasn't had to do this in 40 years.
Nobody on that board or the admin office has ever had to do it.
Yes, exactly.
Nobody.
Exactly. There's probably people on that board that weren't even alive when Danaher was hired.
You're probably right.
So
you're probably right. Yeah. Or they didn't live in the area,
Yeah. So, who knows? So, anyway.
But yeah, I think that's all we got for today.
Okay.
Big show announcement next couple weeks, probably. But Justin, you got anything before we go? Again, I know I just asked you that, but
yeah, it's pretty good, pretty solid little quick show tonight. Enjoyed it.
Man, thanks for coming in last minute.
Regular.
Mike, we'll catch up with you another day. Hope you're getting some good footage at that track meet.
I'm sure he is.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Mike loves track.
Ernest already won the 100 earlier in today's event.
Surprise.
So, yes,
yeah, he's fast.
Yeah. Ernest Campbell runs well. But guys, thanks for tuning in tonight. Hopefully we kind of talked enough about this Refugio job and Coach Herring stepping down.
Thanks, guys.
And thanks, Lynn. And guys, we'll see you guys when we see you. Until then.